Hello, and thank you for listening to Lone Star Silver Screen. I'm your host, Austin Zook, and we're about to jump to my conversation with filmmaker Julian Sol Jordan about Robert Rodriguez's book, Rebel Without a Crew. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up. Towards the end of our recording, Julian did have some technical issues, and we had to finish the conversation via phone. The episode still came together great, but you will notice that when it happens, so I wanted you to be forewarned. Thanks again for taking the time to listen, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to Lone Star Silver Screen, a podcast dedicated to everything that exists at the intersection of Texas and the movies. I'm here today with a friend of mine, a local filmmaker in Dallas, Texas, named Julian Sol Jordan. Julian, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, thank you for joining me. So the reason that you and I are having this conversation is because you recently made a film, your debut film, Real Life. And while you and I were talking about that, we were talking a little bit about Robert Rodriguez's debut film and the book he wrote about his experience making it, Rebel Without a Crew. I know you were in the process of reading that when we spoke originally, and then I recently read it myself, and there were some really interesting similarities between what Rodriguez went through and his experience, even though it was like 30 years ago, and kind of what you've been going through with Real Life.
Yeah, 100%. I was really enjoying it just because of the, sheer just integrity of going out there and making something just for the sake of making it and using what you have and using the resources that you have around you. I mean, in his book, like he really details, it's a wild story. I mean, the way that he financed his movie, the way that he found his friends to act in it and the people that he found to help, kind of I felt kind of seen or heard in some ways reading that book. And it just sort of made me feel like it was something that, I wanted to keep doing. I think for the next few projects, a method that I'm, really interested in. I think that like guerrilla filmmaking like that and using the resources at your disposal sometimes can really birth creativity that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been birthed with constraint or with a bigger budget. Not saying that, a bigger budget isn't nice or having a more solidified script and whatnot isn't helpful. But I think that if you're running around with your camera and you have what you need in what you're making, and if an obstacle comes in the way, you realize that the obstacle's the way. And so that was really interesting to me, and kind of a method that I adopted with the I guess you would call it like an essay film, documentary film, Real Life, which is, for anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's a film I made when I was in college. I was working on some other projects at the time, and it was this essay film that I had, kept coming back to. It's kind of a coming of age, experimental movie, documentary-ish. Me and, I felt like I shared a lot of similar moments that Robert Rodriguez had making El Mariachi, which was, just picking up the camera and filming what came at you. That being said, I think that the next few films that I make might have a little bit more like, I guess, structure per se, but this one really taught me like how to work with what you have and how to make the most out of what you have. And, it was an experiment, and I'm really proud of it and really proud of people that have seen it and the doors that it's opened for me. But I think that the next few projects are going to be the ones that I kind of take what I learned and kind of bring it to the next level.
Well, I want to circle back to all of that. So I want to start. Let's zoom out for a second. Rodriguez has been working for 30 years, basically, since he made El Mariachi. He's done big budget films. He's had successes. He's had some misses. He's made some movies I personally enjoy. What's your relationship to his work? I mean, are you a fan typically?
Sure. I mean, growing up, his work specifically in, the Spy Kids series, that was how I was introduced that's how I was introduced to Rodriguez at a young age. I think it was Spy Kids 3 that I saw for the first time. I think I was like the target audience at that time when it came out. I believe seeing it in the theater in 3D. I just remember it being very, very kind of vivid and strange, and thinking that it felt very specific. It was a very kind of very specific vision, regardless if you're a fan of that film or those films or anything. Like, you can't deny that there's like just an abundance of originality in those films. Like, they're very strange and weird. And I was really drawn to it. And, obviously I loved the first film and the other films in the series. But that was my introduction to Rodriguez at a young age. And I think, and also the Shark Boy and Lava Girl film that he made, which is also a trip of a movie. That's a very strange film, but I remember really enjoying that movie when I was younger. And I think I saw somewhere that he had a desire to make those movies because he had children and he wanted to make films that his kids could watch, but also films that came from him still. And when you watch those movies, you can tell, like, it's like I was saying, it's not really like a typical, I mean, it has its beats or whatnot, but it feels very strange and original. And so that was my first introduction to Robert Rodriguez as a kid. And then growing up, I just started to see him around as like a person. I saw like interviews with him with Tarantino. I saw him with the fedora. I started to recognize him as a person and attribute the films to him and as a person. And then it's to be honest, it's only been as of late that I really started to get more into his work. So, reading Rebel Without a Crew, checking out El Mariachi. There's some films that I have on my queue that I do need to watch, like Desperado and those films. There's the explosion that we're all very familiar with, which is the fireball and then walking away from it. I think that was coined by Rodriguez. I think it was sort of like I think it was a mistake. Like, they couldn't look at the flame, so he was like, just walk away from it and we'll just put it in slow motion and it'll be fine. And you watch it and it's really awesome. But yeah, and and he's a filmmaker that in my 20s now I'm starting to like kind of get into a little bit more and figure out his methods and whatnot. But he's really just someone that I also like to hear talk and speak. I think that he has a lot of optimism and a lot of wisdom in terms of what it means to just be creative and also just to work with what you have.
Yeah, last year, speaking of him speaking, I went to an event. Josh Brolin had just released his memoir, and there was an event in Austin, Texas, where he was in conversation with Robert Rodriguez for, 90 minutes or whatever. I got to go watch them talk, and I was really taken by, first off, Brolin is very funny on stage and in
Yeah,
person. He's got a lot of great stories. Rodriguez is like, he's a really good interviewer and just like
he
comes
is.
across as somebody he's really good to have in a room.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. I was
So
like
I
checking
wanted to
out.
ask you,
I was gonna say, I was just like,
got
I was checking out some of his interviews with like Rogan or something. It's just really interesting dude to listen to.
yeah,
Like, just he's got a lot of wisdom, I think. But continue.
I agree completely. So at the beginning of the book, he starts by talking about his attempt to raise the money he needs for El Mariachi. And he gets the money by entering a like drug testing
Yeah,
program for 30 days. I wanted to ask for your film. I know you filmed it over a couple of years, what, a little over $4,000, give or
sure.
take. What's the craziest thing you've had to do to raise funds for a movie?
Oh man. Well, let me think. It was, to be honest, at first it was just a lot of retail work and just, retail job, putting some into my bills, putting some in here and there. With the camera, it was funny because like this number has been floating around that it costed me, $4,500 or something like that, which is true. I think it was mainly I applied for some grants from a foundation that I was accepted into when I was in high school. I think I applied when I was like 17 or 18, and it was this foundation called Young Arts, which is like this foundation for young artists that are in high school. And I applied for the film category, and I got in. Every month when you're an alumni, every month they allow you to apply for grants. Every month I apply for grants, and I think I applied like 8 or 10 times, man, and I didn't get any of them. That's the game or whatnot. And I remember finally applying, and I got one, and they paid for half of my Blackmagic camera, and the other half came from just doing tons of video work and editing work for people, work that I wasn't necessarily fond of or had too much fun with. But at 20 years old, it really helped pay some pay some bills and stuff. And so that was how I got my camera. And then after that, it was just tons of freelance work or retail work and working jobs that I just really did not enjoy doing. And during the process of shooting this over the course of the couple of years, I got jobs, I lost jobs. I remember when I was at the height of filming it and working on it, I had no job and I was washing dishes. I remember one day I got in a job to wash dishes for $16 an hour, and I washed, I think 30 dishes that day. And then the next day I realized that the schedule wouldn't work, and they brought me into a room and they said, this is no longer going to work for us. Your schedule doesn't align with what we need. So I had that job for one day after searching for months and months. I had it for one day, and I remember being in the car and I just started crying, and I was so upset, man. I was just like, I could not catch a break. Like, I was really struggling. And then while I was crying, I like whipped up my GoPro and started filming it, which was really weird. And I was like, this is weird. And like, this is like, I think maybe my mental health is not super good. But then, I applied for some other jobs. Like, I got some jobs food running. I would put aside all that money to pay bills. So when it comes to how much it costed me to actually make it, or how much I found the financing for, because this is an essay movie and a documentary movie, a lot of the production costs were, I was the editor, I was the cinematographer, I was in it, I directed it. And so if we're talking about costs in terms of just like little things, if my friends were in it, I would get them some donuts or some pizza or whatever. And then the other costs were just gas money that I would pay with, busting my butt at these retail jobs that I didn't like. And then finally I got a job at Buff City Soap for a year, and I was making soap while I was editing this movie. I remember I would like work all day, and then I would work another shift at this food running place. And then afterwards I would go and I would film for like 2 hours trying to catch the sunlight. And it was kind of a tumultuous time, man. But I think the cost of the movie was just my willpower and finding the little semblance of light to chase and to trust. And that I think I'm going to look back on this time fondly as knowing, I had no one to answer to, but also I had no one to answer to. And so it was kind of a thing of just trying to figure out and trying to trust myself. I'm really proud that I owe no money on this movie, and that I owe, I don't owe anyone answers. And it's done, what it's done. It's opened some doors, and I think that I can really go into these next projects knowing like what it takes to really make a movie, because it's difficult.
So I want to talk a little bit about the money piece.
Sure.
So for Rodriguez, he talks about how his whole plan making El Mariachi was, we're going to make this, it's going to suck, and then we're going to sell it to the Spanish video market.
Yeah.
And we're going to make it for so cheap that when we sell it to them, they won't care that it sucks, because it's going to be better than most of the stuff that they have right now. And we're going to make a little profit and be able to fund some other films that will have learned lessons on this one, and they'll be better. I know real life was something that you kind of worked on in fits and starts over a couple of years, but whenever you're embarking on a new project, I mean, how much is kind of that return on investment factoring into what you're doing or how you're approaching it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, and it was weird because, for this movie, it was like, I think, because if you read the book, you realize that, without spoiling anything, that his plan doesn't necessarily go as he planned, but for better, and I think that with this movie, it was the same way, but in a different way. Like it didn't get into any festivals, but the story of perseverance of it really resonated and kind of allowed me to really, like I was saying, get a little bit of recognition and get my foot in the door in some ways. And so I think I was really thinking of this movie as like, I was putting a lot on the line with it. And it was in my head, it was a little bit more, of a realized movie. And I think that my plan was, okay, I'm going to, commit it to Slam Dance. It's going to get in, it's going to get acquired, this and that. And I realized that, that wasn't the case. And so in terms of return on investment, I'm really trying to make sure that I approach the next film and the next films. I really want to make sure that I'm making some shorter stuff first, but in terms of just how I see things for long-term investments and stuff, I want to make sure that I am aware of the outcome and aware of what can happen once I finish it, but not approach it and create it with that in mind, or with that on the forefront of my mind, because sometimes when you're thinking too much about the outcome, the product can suffer a little bit. And so, I think that I want to make sure that the next thing that I make is still cheap, because I know how to make things for cheap. I think that that's one trait that I am proud of, is that I'm able to kind of work with what I have and work with limited resources. So I mean, if someone gives me $1 million to make a movie, yeah, but like, it's not you. I still am in the position where I have to prove myself. And I also do really just enjoy the DIY nature of picking up a camera and having some friends around. And so for the next few films, like, that sounds really exciting to me, because this movie was all just me. It was me alone by myself. And so I want to make sure that I'm making the next things for cheap, especially the next feature for cheap. But I also do know that the idea that I have and the ideas that are coming to me for the next project, for the next projects, are of value, if that makes any sense. I know that it's not just an hour and a half of me like walking in a street, but I do think that, because I want this to be a viable career for me. You know what I mean? Like, I have a band, an indie band with my buddy that we've spent a lot of time on, and I'm really proud of the music, and I stand by the music that we've made, but also it pays my rent. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that I'm really going into this next year trying to really sharpen those skills as a filmmaker with some shorter films. But when it comes time to do the next feature, I really want to make sure that I'm using those skills and using those traits that I garnered on the last film for this new one, but also knowing that there's a story to be sold or whatever, if that makes any sense. So I think my plan is just in terms of investment, just making something for as little as possible, especially right now when have a low overhead, and just making it the best I can, and then, seeing what I can do with it, because you can make stuff for cheap that looks expensive. Like, that's possible. You're able to do that. And so I think it just depends on how can I do that, but also how can I make something that audiences are going to also appreciate and enjoy, because in real life is a personal essay type film. So it's not really something that people are going to buy tickets to see. But I also think that's where the story of it landed, because it was a story of perseverance. But I'm really interested in making something that people want to purchase on iTunes, or they want to buy a copy of, or they want to, they want to get. And so I guess my plan is, just make it for as cheap as possible, and see how much I can flip that for,
And so one thing, kind of talking about making films for a reasonable budget, keeping them cheap, something that comes up again and again in the book after El Mariachi gets the attention of Hollywood, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do with it, and going through all this process to get it up to standard so they can show it in theaters, is Rodriguez is getting really frustrated with that process, because he's like, it's taking them 3 weeks to do something I can do in 3 days. And, they think you need to do this, this, and this, and they're doing it all wrong. And I know that if I just did it myself, it would kill me, but I could do it right. Do you feel like having this background in indie film is going to make you more independent, even when you move up to kind of these larger budget projects in the future?
Definitely. What's funny is I was listening to this podcast on the way here. It was Trey Edward Schultz, and he had made a film called Krisha in 2015, 16, I think it was 15, I believe. It was one of those films that in high school I watched, and I like pretended that I understood or whatever. Going now as an adult, I watched and I'm just like, oh, brilliant, But Trey Edward Schultz is really big on the podcast I was listening to just now. He was saying that, his goal was to be an auteur filmmaker, which is, I think sometimes people get that mixed up as like, you're calling yourself a master at your craft. And that's not what that means. An auteur means that it's someone that works better, having more control over many aspects of the movie in terms of editing and writing and directing and cinematography. Not because it feeds their ego, but because that's just how they work. That's how they work best. And that's something that I'm very interested in doing. I'm very interested in shooting my own stuff, very interested in editing my own stuff and writing it and directing it. Not because, if someone helped me out with that, if I wasn't able to do that, if I didn't know how to shoot a film, if I didn't know how to edit it, I think, to be honest, it would just make the process easier on me. So I think I'm maybe taking a little bit of it's a hard way there. Going back to what you're saying is like, I think it is something that I really want to make sure that as I progress in my career, is like making sure that maintain the qualities that I have now, but maybe just on a bigger scope. I don't know if I'll be carrying the tripod and boom pole and gear up a hill in the next 20 years. Maybe I would love to. I mean, I think that's also what filmmaking is too. Like I really love seeing directors like hauling gear up a hill. And so I think that's something that I really want to make sure that I maintain. And also it also like cuts budget costs too. You know, like if you're editing your own movie, if you're shooting it, that's something that, well, there's $100,000. You don't have to, you know what I mean? Like, maybe not $100,000, but, it's also just how I work. And so, yeah, I think that's also one thing I really appreciate about Rodriguez is like his ability to do that. You know, he still shoots a lot of his films, writes them, directs them. That also just sounds appealing to me as well. So, but it's a weird double-edged sword because, you know, I think 10 years ago, if you were to tell a studio, you know, yeah, I shot, directed, edited my film, they would look at it maybe as less than or something. But I think we're entering a new age where like that's maybe not as true anymore.
So something else I wanted to ask you about is he details the filming process for El Mariachi. He goes through basically day by day what they did every day, and he calls out some mistakes that made it into the film because again, like I said earlier, he was like, well, this isn't going to be good. That's okay. It just has to be finished. And so like there are scenes where there are inconsistencies in like what the actors are wearing in between shots. So with your film, it's more of an essay, so you didn't have to worry about continuity in the same way, but were there any happy accidents that made it into the final product where you were kind of surprised you had captured something?
Yeah, I mean, it was really strange because working on the movie was like, hey, that's why I'm really excited for the next films is like, I think I want to maintain that kind of quality of like spontaneity, but also having a little bit more control over the narrative sounds very exciting to me because with this one, I was sort of out waiting for whatever to come to me, whatever ideas to come to me or not to say that there wasn't a, you know, control over what was happening, but it was a little bit more free falling in that sense. And in terms of happy accidents, it was really strange because at first I think I had a much bigger or a more different idea of like what it was going to turn out like. And I had like a whiteboard filled with ideas and I ended up having to cut like a lot of it because it just was not working. What's weird is when you're editing, you start to realize like what needs to go, what doesn't need to go. And so, I guess maybe, man, I'm trying to think of what happy accidents there could be. I mean, I feel like the whole thing was a happy accident, not gonna lie. Like, I think like it was a freaking miracle that it just exists. I don't know. I think like what's weird is like now at 24, like I think that I don't know if I would have as much courage to do what I went off and did, maybe because I know a little bit more about how the industry works or something. But also that's one thing I'm trying to like maybe not pay attention to as much because like when you start to like get into the industry networking side of things, people start telling what you can and can't do. And so I think going into this, like it was honestly, man, I mean, I just want to say the whole thing is a happy accident because it's like, I don't know how it happened. Like, I don't know how the things fell into place. I don't know how my friends were able to be there on that day to do it. I don't know how, you know, I was able to get that shot at a perfect time of day with the sun. It was really just, I think the lack of control over the entire thing in terms of structure and narrative really allowed itself to like feel a little bit more organic. And I think that in and of itself is maybe a happy accident. And, you know, in terms of just like little things, I mean, my camera died on one day, so I had to use a GoPro or a VHS, but then it makes it look even more beautiful. I think, friend couldn't be here on this day, so I decided to go film something else and it was even better. You know, there's a lot of little different things that I'm not sure I can remember off the top of my dome, but it was just, I think going back to what we were saying about just allowing the obstacles to be the way, I think this was like a really big project that was just full of that. Like every single thing was just, well, this doesn't work, so like, let's do this. Or, you know, this doesn't work, so let's do that. And you just have to pivot and you have to work with what's coming at you. And so, yeah, I mean, just to be honest, when I think about the process of it, it's very much a blur. Like it was very kind of intense and weird and kind of free flowing, but I think it's just a miracle it existed. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it was just full of happy accidents. The whole thing is, man.
That's awesome. No, no, that's a perfect answer. So I also wanted to ask, Rodriguez gets put in a very interesting situation after the film gets picked up by Hollywood, where basically the executives are trying to decide if they want him to remake El Mariachi or if they want to release it as is and have him work on a sequel. I wanted to ask you, as a filmmaker yourself, if you were in that position, would you rather remake or sequelize?
Man, that's a tough thing, because it's like we all know the story, neither happened. But I guess it did sort of happen with his, other film, but I guess he didn't have to remake El Mariachi, but I don't know. It's tough because I don't know if I'm a huge fan of sequels. I mean, I love sequels. I don't know if that's something I'm interested in maybe doing. So if it came down to the wire, maybe remake it or something. But also there's something about remaking something that you just made that maybe I don't know if that also sounds appealing to me because it's like, well, the thing that you liked is you liked it because it is what it is and it's pure in that sense. And like maybe it's filled with flaws, but like I don't know if I'm there anymore. I don't know if I'm at that place creatively anymore. Like I don't know if I can even do it justice. But of course I've thought about, in 10 years time, I think the concept of what real life was, I think it would be really cool to like visit it in a more structured way. But also I don't even know if I have any interest in doing that. Like I don't know what I would call it if it was a sequel, like realer life or something. I don't know. Like, but yeah, like I even had some friends tell me like, you should really, make a sequel or add on to it. And I'm like, I mean, I get what you're saying. Like it's kind of a moment in time. It's like it would be cool to make it a giant boyhood type thing, but also like, it is what it is. Like I just, it was this moment in time and I do like the idea of making it this giant thing, but that's not what I set out to do. I set out to make a really tiny snapshot of what it feels like to enter the real world when you're 21, 22, and those existential thoughts are. So I don't know if, man, it would be tough. I think if I was asked that question, I would just put out another script that's similar in terms of themes and stuff. But I guess to answer that question, maybe remake, but also I'm not sure. I don't know, man. I'm not a huge fan of either of those things, but I think it just maybe works a little bit more in El Mariachi's favor because it's such a action genre type film that like a sequel sort of makes more sense.
So my last question for you on this topic is, when you and I originally talked, it seemed like you were still trying to categorize real life in your mind and put it in perspective. You told me at that time that you really wanted to do something that felt a little more written. You wanted something that had more of a literary quality to it. But talking to you today, it seems like you have really come to terms with this project and where it fits into what you are trying to build of your career.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine named Frank Mosley, and he's a actor filmmaker based in LA. He's really very well respected dude in the indie film world. Very, very nice guy. And he had just written me like some letter for something, but the way that he categorized real life was, and I've been mentioning this a few times in this podcast, as an essay film. And I think that when you're able to put a label on something, it makes it feel a little less ambiguous. And so I think that I'm really proud in calling it that. It's something that I think in a couple years time, people can find on my website. I think it can be like a little exclusive type film, maybe on my Vimeo or something like that. But that's what it is. And it served a purpose. And I remember someone telling me a while ago, like, when it wasn't finished, I was like planning on like putting it on iTunes and Amazon and stuff. And they were like, well, you should really just put it on like online for free right now. Like just see what happens because it's not really something that people are going to want to go buy, but like maybe later they will. And so that's where it is right now. And I plan on it being an exclusive movie that, my career people can be like, oh, how do I find it? And, you got to go on the website, you got to go on the Vimeo or whatever. I think that I'm still making peace with it. It was a very intense film and sometimes I do get in my head about it, but I think that the answer is just new work. And so that's why I'm really excited to work on some new short films that are made with maybe a little bit more intention, but also just to really experiment and give people a taste of who I am as a filmmaker. And that's very, very exciting to me because it's low stakes, but it's also really fun. And I think that's something that, I envy a little bit with the music that me and my friend make, is that we're able just to, pick up a guitar and make 3 songs in an hour or whatever. Not saying that you can't do that with film and writing scripts, but it is a little bit harder to get a film made. It's a lot harder to get a film made rather than a song. And I think that it's like, a little strange to just be in that headspace of making something for so long and not knowing where it fits in or what it means, or also, needing to move on creatively. But I'm still making peace with it and knowing that it was something that about it. Everyone has that thing that gets them started, and I'm really, really proud of it. And I think that I'm really excited to make some shorter stuff and really just continue to have fun making stuff, because I'm not gonna lie, like real life was fun in some ways, but I wouldn't say it was like a fun movie to make. Like it was pretty hard on my psyche. And I think maybe as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, I was like feeding into that a little bit, maybe fetishizing that idea that it was torturing me.
Should be hard.
Yeah, this should be hard. This serves the story. And when you watch the movie, that's very evident. It's like very the whole movie is about some dude doubting himself or whatever. But I think that not every movie has to be, that if you watch Linkletter's stuff, like his first film, he spent like the same amount of time, like 2-3 years on this movie called It's Impossible to Plow by reading books. And it's like if real life was like just me walking for 80 minutes, like literally, like that's kind of all it is. It's great. I mean, it's beautifully shot, like really cool to watch, but it didn't get distribution, but then he like passed it around and it got him to make Slacker. And so then you can watch his first film on like Criterion, like Vimeo, like all these places where they don't necessarily fit into like the realm of like on-demand video or whatever, but there's still like these films that people want to watch if they want to watch it. And, it'll always be on my IMDb. It'll always be on these places. And, maybe in some time it'll be on a different platform, but I think that I've categorized it now as an essay, like a thesis film that I made in college. I got some gears turning, and I'm really ready to get back to the grassroots of what it means to be a filmmaker and creative, and experiment just with some short stuff. And then I do have a feature script that I think really cool. And I think that I would love to shoot it in the same spirit as real life, obviously with the crew and stuff, but that kind of, why guerrilla style nature. I think that if you have good visuals and you get a good sound mix with a good score, people don't like, you can't really tell the difference. And so that's something that excites me. And so, I'm going into the rest of this year and this next year, really focusing on that. And yeah, I mean, it's, really proud of what this has done for me. I mean, to be honest, man, like it could have just, done nothing, and it would have been what it was. And that was my plan, it was an experiment, but it's, me, some connections has gotten me, some doors. And so, yeah, it's my thesis, essay film.
Julian, thank you for joining me today, man. I have absolutely loved this.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. This is awesome. I love doing stuff like this.
Well, so now it's time for the fun part. We're going to do some plugs. Okay.
Okay, let's
So
do it.
you've mentioned your band a couple of times. You need to say the name at least once on mic, and then you need to tell people where they can go to keep up with you and your work.
Sure. Yeah. So Sunrise Academy is the band. It's a band that me and my best friend Jakob started. We had met at summer camp when we were 13 years old, and we started playing campfire songs when we were young. And a couple years ago, we started sharing our story on the internet, and for lack of better words, we blew up. And we make some really fun indie pop music that is something that I can always turn to in times of creative doubt or creative stagnancy. And it's very fun, and I'm so blessed to be able to do it with my best friend. It's, like I said, it pays my bills, and it's really joyous and just great vibes. Like it makes me very, very happy to work on that music. And, I'm not the best, most proficient musician. I can play some chords, I can sing, write a melody, but all I know is that it's fun. And that's that's the most important thing. But in terms of the film work, look up Julian Sol Jordan on Instagram, on juliansoljordan.com. Keep up to date with everything. This is really the year of focus, and this is really the year that I think you'll start to see a little bit more of the work. So yeah, man, thank you so much for having me. This was really a pleasure, and I really love doing stuff like this.
Well, and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about a feature making the rounds right now that you edited. El Tanto por Cristo is, at the time of our recording, you're about to have the premiere here in Dallas, but then you're going to take it on the road, right?
Yes, sir, man. That was a film that my dad made. It's a Texas film about these monks on the coast of Texas, and it's kind of a European style cinema. So in the same vein as Tarkovsky and Bergman and those kind of films. But it's a feature that I edited while I was working on real life and some other projects. And it was such a joy to work on that film. And it's got a lot of really cool actors in it. It's really beautiful score. It's a legit movie. So anyone that's interested in this film, go check it out. And yeah, it'll be on the national tour around the country. Then next year, I think they're going to do some more places, and then it'll be in some theaters, and then it'll be streaming. And I was really blessed to work on that film. Yeah.
It's a really great movie, and I want you to know that while I watch it, all I can think of is you sitting at that table made out of a door drinking
Yeah.
Modelo for 6 months.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, for anyone that doesn't know, like that's the editing life, man. Like one of our friends had an office that I would go to every day, and he made like this makeshift editing room, and I would just pull up with McDonald's coffee and be caffeinated, subdue it with Modelo while I was editing and getting this weird flow. It was kind of very appropriate for the type of film as you might
Oh yeah.
see.
That was my conversation with filmmaker Julian Sol Jordan. If you liked what you heard, please remember to rate, review, and follow us wherever it is you get your podcasts. It's an easy way to support the show and help people find us. I'll be back next week with another new episode, but in the meantime, I'll see you at the movies and on the dusty trails of Texas.